Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapons series. I am your host, Captain Matt, and today we're talking about electric boats. The reason I've had some requests on the channel to talk about this topic, and there's been a lot of news on the topic, and I've actually had the opportunity to run one of the most advanced electric boats on the market. It was the Marine Vision technology electric outboard. It's a 180 horsepower outboard engine. It is the Marine Vision Technologies motor, and it is another manufacturer's lower unit that's already in production. I haven't confirmed who it is. I know I've been told who it is, but I haven't confirmed it with Marine Vision Technology. I'll talk more about that experience, but you can see the running right here as we get into the pros and cons and my thoughts on it. So you can look at some of the companies that are getting into and have been in the electric propulsion, electric boat space. You'll notice Duffy Electric's been around for a while. Torqeedo has been building the electric outboards on the smaller side. Vision Marine Technology, which is the one that I ran down at Ibex. They're a Canadian company. You can see a lot of these companies, Xshore, Candela, we'll talk about some of these, are European companies, are Canadian companies. There's only one, Pier Watercraft, that's in the U.S. Aeronautique has produced their GS22E, which is their electric version. You can see it'll run for 2 to 3 hours of water sports time and retails for almost $300,000. The best that I can tell, they sold about 20 of those last year. So, but you're also seeing a lot of money come into this space, as you are with electric vehicles, a lot of the so-called green technology. And GM just put $150 million into Pure Watercraft. You may have seen their ads if you've watched my channel for a while. They really did a lot of advertising leading up to that, and you saw them on the channel quite a bit. They had a pontoon that they were promoting that led to their investment by General Motors. Now, I don't think advertising on my channel did it, but they were advertising on my channel prior to that investment. Vision Marine Technologies, they're the company that I ran the outboard that you saw the demo. And Vision Marine Technologies is a public company, and they just signed a partnership with Linamar Corp, which is a subsidiary of McLaren Engineering, to actually produce these outboards on a production scale. So that's where they're at. They're ready to go. ARC just took a $30 million investment to build their boat and propulsion system. This is a couple of SpaceX guys that have gone out and got into the boating segment. Also, within their most recent investment, Will Smith, Kevin Durant, and a couple other celebrities invested, which I thought was kind of interesting. I would guess with the cachet of the SpaceX, gives them the additional investment. They started with $4.5 million. Candela, they've got this pod drive system where they're incorporating a lot of different technology. They've got the electric propulsion, they've got pod drives, and they've got the hydrofin built into their pod. You can kind of see it here. Very interesting. Counter-rotating props, that little pod bullet, which allows that electric motor to be fully encased, but then just the natural cooling of the water going over that pod is going to cool those electric motors, and it is going to save the battery life so that you've got the efficiency of the hydrofoil. You've got the efficiency that you don't have to run any water pumps to cool those electric motors, because they do produce a lot of heat. When I was running the outboard, there was a huge water stream coming out, which was cooling the motors, the batteries, and the system. So it's supposed to be beneficial, a very interesting combination of technologies, and a very interesting boat. And then this is Xshore from Sweden. You'll see this is how they are marketing it, is they'll say, can 100 nautical miles per charge, and then at 6 knots, up to 2 hours of cruising at 22 knots. So very, very different from just a putting around to actually running the boat the way a lot of pleasure boaters operate their boats, and then 10% of the running cost of a fossil fuel vessel. So they're saying it's much cheaper to own the electric engines, and most of the people that are buying it, we'll talk about the numbers, are, hey, they want to go electric and they're doing it for environmental reasons. So not only are you seeing a lot of money coming in, but you're also seeing the big names in the industry going this direction. Mercury and Navco join forces in the electric series. Yamaha develops electric propulsion. Those are both in September of 2021. And then Volvo, they remember when they shuttered the 7 Marine, they made that big acquisition of 7 Marine, the big outboard horsepower. Mercury came out with the 600. They said, hey, we're going to shut that down and we're going to focus on the emerging technologies, is kind of the way they put it, but basically talking about their electric IPS system, and that was done in late 2020. Is when they made those announcements. So let's look a little bit more at this running, because I experienced it. We were on a Pontoon, which was Marine Vision Technologies propulsion, on a production pontoon. They had the battery pack, they had the 180. Now I ran it with about 8 people on the boat, so 8 adults, and the full battery bank that they have. And it had good pickup. It had good speed with that number of people on it. It was a tri-tune, but that boat was pretty full, and I was impressed with the performance of the boat. So here's the pros and cons as I see it. So the pros: you've got great torque with these electric engines. I was talking to my cousin-in-law at Thanksgiving that works in the drone field, and he's working with the U.S. Air Force on kind of building out the industry for passenger drones. And it was talking about the electric motors, and one of the things that he said is they've got such great torque because it's going right to it, and there's a lot of options in the design, because with the electric motor, you don't have to worry about all of the things in engineering that you do with a combustion engine. So you've got good speed with the 180 that I was on. You know, it had good pickup. It had good top speed for the number of people that we had on that boat. It was quiet with one exception. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. There's a ton of money being invested, which means that what we have now is going to, in my opinion, it's going to exponentially improve as battery power gets better. I think that is one of the biggest things that needs to be addressed. We'll talk about that in the cons. You've got governments all over the world pushing, we've got to go green, we've got to do this. Now, I'll give you my thoughts on, is electric propulsion green or not. The pros: there's a lot of improvement in the battery technology, and then the design options. Like I said, my cousin was telling me that, you know, the things you can do in a drone is, because you don't really have any constraints with that, getting the power from the motor to whatever your propulsion system is. You can do a lot of creative things, which I think is going to come in play in the boating world. Now, the con: it's the range at speed. So a lot of these companies are saying, hey, we can go for 6 hours, we can go for 5 hours, but that's running at, you know, the equivalent of 1,800 RPMs, idle speed. Not the way most people that listen to this channel boat. The recharge time: when I was talking to the folks at Marine Vision Technologies, they were really, I'm going to say, squirrely on this question, and I really pressed on it, is, hey, what's the recharge time and how long is that going to get you in the range? And they kept saying, well, the range it depends on how you run the boat, just like with the combustion engine. The difference is I can just run over and fill up with fuel, or have some gas on the dock if I don't have a fuel pump on my dock, and I can be back on the water in 10 minutes, easy. the recharge time they're saying is, kind of overnight. That seemed to be the normal recharge, and they said, you can do it faster if you've got 220, and depends on what the electricity is. And when I finally got to an engineer that was trying to talk me through the kilowatts, hours, and the math behind it, he basically said on the 180 with the full charge and running that boat at the equivalent of about 4 to 5,000 RPM. So kind of, hey, up on plane, and running, let's say 30 miles an hour. So, not at the lowest cruise speed or optimal cruise speed, but at a decent speed. He said an hour or two. To me, it's not there yet for prime time. And when I told this to the sales guys, he wasn't having it. But they're also, they're early in the stage. They're fully behind this, and they're looking for additional capital to grow this because they know they've got improvements to make, but they have a very good start on it from my experience. The fire danger with that big battery pack, and I'll show you a picture of it on the boat that I was on. It was like 420 pounds, I think, is what the battery pack was. But that's lithium batteries, which, if you've heard about, the cell phones that were catching on fire on plane years ago, the little scooter thing that was catching on fire in people's homes around Christmas a couple years ago. Those lithium batteries have not the tendency, but they can, if there's damage to them, if they're not installed properly, if there's something wrong with it, they can burn, and they burn incredibly, incredibly hot because of the way they're designed. And that on a boat is an issue. It didn't dawn on me until I started researching to put this video together, that how big of an issue that could be, and what are the precautions that they're doing there. Now, I have not heard of anything in the recreational, but if you do some research on yachts and lithium fires, you'll see some issues there. There was one that they had like a surfboard, a jet electric propelled surfboard that caught on fire in a yacht and caused issues. Some of the other toys, not necessarily the electric motor battery bank, if that makes sense. What's the environmental impact? So you say, hey, electric is green. Well, what's the environmental impact if one of these batteries goes into the water? Is there any discharge? Is there any impact there? The environmental impact of dead batteries. This is one that gets me on the auto side is, hey, what happens in 10 years when these batteries are all used up, and now we've got this big, huge lithium ion battery that doesn't have any value. Maybe it can be recycled, but our history of that is pretty low. What are we going to do with them? And there's 200,000, 300,000 boats made a year, but there's millions and millions of cars made a year. What's going to happen with all those batteries if we continue down this path? And then the environmental impact, it's electricity. Electricity needs to be produced, just like oil needs to be pulled out and refined into gasoline. You can't just get electricity because you want it. You've got to do something to create it. Coal, nuclear, run a generator, the wind turbines, which haven't proven to be as effective as they had hoped. What's that look like? And then the natural resources to build these batteries. They're rare metals, and you've got lithium, you've got cobalt, and you've got nickel. And if you do some research on where they're pulling it, cobalt specifically in the Congo, a very toxic metal when it comes out of the ground, and the child labor and the conditions that people are doing it, the burning of the rainforest and the just everything, all of the impact that goes on with this. It's one of those unintended consequences that, man, yes, we need to do something about the pollution and about the environment and taking care of that. And yet I want to make sure that the path we go down to fix it is we think about those long-term consequences from these changes versus just, hey, yep, this is the way we're going, and you go down, even though there's some negatives that need to be figured out. So that's the way I see it. Now, I mentioned the one exception on the quiet. It was silent, essentially. They started it up, and they did the whole you can't even hear the boat. It wasn't. It's not much quieter than a regular new outboard, but it was really silent, other than the water pouring out, which it does need quite a bit of water to cool those batteries. But on the one I was on, there was a very high-pitched whine, I'll call it, that I could hear. Some people on the boat couldn't hear it. It was at a frequency, I think, that some of the folks on the boat, they didn't notice it at all. I heard it almost instantly once we started going. You can't hear it in the video. I guess there's too much other noise or whatever. The microphone didn't pick it up. But as we were going, nobody was saying anything. There was a boat manufacturer, an engineer, and his partner that was, hey, is this something we can put on our boats? There was some friends of the guys running the boat. There was a show promoter from Mexico that was on the boat, him and his wife. And then there were two employees, the COO and the vice president of sales and marketing, that were on the boat as well. Great guys. But when I said, hey, what's that whine? Nobody had talked about it. We were out on the water for 30 minutes. Nobody had mentioned it. And they said, oh, that's nothing. It's just the conversion of the power to the gearbox or something like that. And I said, for me, it was driving me crazy the whole time. They said, it's nothing. We can fix that easy. It's just a matter of sound dampening. And they really it was a non-issue. I don't know if maybe they didn't hear it. It wasn't as noticeable to them for whatever reason. Maybe their hearing was different, but it's one of those things that I said, from my standpoint as a consumer advocate, there's nobody that if they can hear it, there's nobody that's going to go on a boat with that annoying sound. And they assured me it was an easy fix. So I'm going to take them at their word on that with some sound dampening and some adjustment. They mentioned that on the early electric vehicles that was a common thing, and they've been able to address it. So known issue, but something that I thought was or something was worth mentioning. But really, to me, it's the range at speed and the recharge time, and that all comes down to battery. What happens in the battery world. I think that's going to have a major impact. So let's look at actual numbers of electric boats. Well, if you read the news, they saying electric boats are skyrocketing. They're up 34%, which is true. The percentage is growing significantly. But the reality is, in 2020, there was 178 electric boats produced, and in 2021, it's 240. And that's year to date as of September. So these are the most recent numbers that I could find. And so it's a very small segment. I mean, if you look in the ski and wake boat, like I said, Nautique produced about 20 delivered 20 electric boats out of the 11,000 wake boats that were produced. I would venture to say that Nautique produces a couple thousand of those 11,000. So it's a very small number right now. It's a new technology. There's a lot of improvements that need to be made. Who of the companies are going to win? There's a lot of money coming into it, so there's going to be a lot of improvements. It's going to be quick. It's going to grow exponentially, I believe. And so those are a few of the things that I think about on the Elect Power. For me, and remember, I've done videos where I say never buy the first generation of anything in boating. I said that about the Mercury 600. I say that about new boat models that a manufacturer produces. There's just too many things that you can't reproduce about normal everyday use when you only have a handful of prototype boats on the market. We've got 240, 178. So we've got less than 1,000, we'll say less than 1,000 electric boats on the water right now. There's not enough real world application to know what do those fire issues look like? What's the infrastructure going to look like for charging a battery? And is it going to be, hey, when you're out on the water, once that battery is gone, you got to put that boat up for several hours before you can go out again and get a full charge. Certainly offshore, they say, hey, a gas engine can run out of gas. True, but I can carry extra gas on the boat and I can refill it. I can manage my run to lower my gallons per hour because the manufacturers, there's a gauge on your boat that says gallon per hour's burn, but they were very tight-lipped on kind of the kilowatts usage, or they weren't able to explain it to me in a way that made sense to me, and that may have been just my ignorance. So, but that's where we are. The fire issue is something that you can do some research on that yourself that needs to be addressed. And then for me, when it comes to the environment, hey, the boating market, yes, we need to look at this, and I hope that we progress and find some better solutions. Think about it. In the 70s, the puff of smoke and the oil slick in the water behind the old two-strokes, yeah, they were reliable, but man, they did put a lot of crap in the environment. The fuel spills that happen at the gas dock, at the marina, those are certainly issues. But it's a small segment. I would love it if the government said, hey, let's look at what some of the big corporations are doing in production and improve our pollution control there and doing some smarter things. Let's look at the pesticides and the chemicals that are put in agriculture that's going into the rivers and lakes and streams and the groundwater, and then the plastic that's all over the place. Let's focus on those big needle movers, and not, hey, we're going to outlaw combustion engines in boating, which is such a tiny thing. Let's put some effort in some real needle movers, and that's just my own personal opinion. So I wanted to throw that in there. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment. If you have experience with an electric boat, I've had one experience with one manufacturer with the outboards. Would love to hear others. And let me know what you thought of this video, what your thoughts are on this whole environmental thing, the electric, getting into boating. And one thing I didn't mention is the combination of electricity, our battery powers, and water. And what does that look like if the boat sinks? What's going to happen? And are you going to be dead in the water if you start taking on water and that battery gets wet? What does that look like? So thanks a lot. And remember, life truly is better on a boat.